Hello and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher. Hello dear listener, I hope you're well. It seems to be quite a tough time for many people at the moment. Huge life issues coming up to be processed. Ground-shaking stuff that can really floor people, whether it's health problems or aspects to do with security, as in money, home, jobs, what I would describe as root chakra issues. But what I'm also noticing is the immense amount of loving support that is being offered to folks going through these hard times, whether it's due to the fact that we all came through the lockdown era together or simply a sign of these times. It seems to me that there's a lot of heart connection around, including reconnections, collaborations, and new beginnings. I think I've said in recent episodes that this time seems to feel similar to shifts that took place in 2016 and 2020. We're going through another door here by the looks of it, but I do feel very positive about it. Wherever you find your faith, it's good to hold your focus there right now. You are in for an absolute treat in this episode. We have two stories gifted to us by storyteller extraordinaire Owen Staton. More on that in a minute, as I firstly want to thank the Curious crew for all their generous support which is building this project into being. I could not do any of this without them. A special shout out to Emma, who joined on the Weird Folk tier recently. And we've been having some super get-togethers recently as well. Tea ritual workshops with Todd Groob and really fun Zoom chats, one of which was this morning. We are planning an in-person meetup in the UK at the end of June. And that's because we have a member from the US that happens to be in England around that time. And so we're going to make the most of that and actually get to meet each other, which is really exciting. We're also due to start a new course of shamanic qigong in early June. Lots going on. I've been creating tons of bonus content too, and if you feel like checking that out, there is in fact a 7-day free trial on Patreon at the moment, so it's a good time to drop by and see what it is we're all up to in our loving community. As always, you can contact me via scarletofthefae.com, where the show notes are held. If you have any questions or comments about the podcast, or if you have your own experience that you want to share, or you can contact me by email at scarletofthefae@gmail.com. I'm also on Insta and Twitter at _remain_curious. Now, down to this episode, which is a fantastic chat with the great Owen Staton, host of Time Between Times Storytelling Podcast, featuring tales delivered in his unique way, which eases you rather uncannily into an entirely different state altogether. Owen is also co-host of Spectre of the Sea, along with Bethan Briggs-Miller, an atmospheric series weaving Welsh legend and folklore. It's a mighty collaboration between the two of them, and I recommend listening to both of these. Owen offers a live fireside tale on Twitter Spaces on some Sunday evening, so do follow him on Twitter and check those out. He also has a Patreon, so you can find him there too. We are treated to two tales in this episode. One is a warning tale about messing with the Tylwyth Teg, the Fae folk of Wales. Now, I feel I had a little bit of a brush, potentially, with the Tylwyth Teg, as I tried to release this video version to patrons last night, and it just would not work. I tried the entire evening in every which way, and I've never had that issue before, but my computer just was not playing ball whatsoever, and I did say at that point that I would make an offering of cake, which we have come through with today, and there is a fairy cake under the tree right now, which was baked this morning and it's out there, and I will be making a secondary offering of butter and milk, or perhaps cream. I might even take some cider out there and offer that too, because eventually I got it to work. So yeah, look out. and the second story is Welsh legend Gwion and the Witch. Owen also describes his own orb experience which happened in childhood and shares with us some of the strange occurrences which he remembers from his previous career as a policeman in rural South Wales. It's a lovely chat with an absolute gent, so find a comfortable place to perch, and as Owen warns, once the stories kick in, please do not drive or operate any heavy machinery when listening. I will also be releasing the video version, as I say, of this chat on YouTube later in the week. If you haven't checked that out already, please do head over and please do subscribe. It really helps. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy and see you next time, or perhaps even on Patreon if you decide to drop by. Much love, and in these times of great transition, it always helps to remain curious. Time to Welcome everybody. I'm very excited to have with me a lovely guest who many of you may be very familiar with as well. This is Owen Staton, storyteller extraordinaire and host of Time Between Times podcast and Spectre of the Sea, which he also creates with Bethan Briggs-Miller of Eerie Essex podcast. So welcome, Owen.
Thank you, Jo. Thank you very much for having me.
I'm really pleased we managed to get together and have a chat, because I was just saying to you, well, I've been a fan for ages and listening to your work. I find it fantastic. I really, really love listening. I'm always pinging your podcast to people and saying, listen to this. And as I say, my husband, Peter, is a really big fan as well of the Time Between Times, but also the Spectre of the Sea. We really love it. Great work there with Bethan and the sound effects and everything. You just get right into it. Yeah, it's really cool.
That's good. That's lovely to hear. Thank you. And I'm a big fan of this podcast as well. I've listened more or less from the start, and I'm always fascinated with the stories the guests say, because at its heart, it's a storytelling podcast in its own way, isn't it? Which is a nice thing. And I'm very lucky. I live just by the forest, and I walk my dog every day, and we go up there, and loads of people in the pandemic created loads of fairy doors and things like that. And there's like a little magical part of the forest, and I'm always up there with the Modern Fairy podcast on there, so which is great. And it's always nice. I'm always looking about to see if I can see anything, but I haven't been quite so lucky yet. But there we go.
You never know. Yeah, it'll be when you're least expecting it, won't it?
Absolutely,
as
it will.
Stories go.
That's right.
Yeah. So what got you into storytelling? I'm always wondering whether, you've got such a gift for it, that I just wondered if it runs through your family. Did any of your family members, were they storytellers?
Not really. In fact, I'm the only one of my family who's got like a theatrical sort of background, really. My family are very much working class South Wales people. My father was a postman and worked in the steel industry for years and years. My mother was a doctor's secretary. And when I was young, I always had a passion for acting, a passion for performing. I'm from Port Talbot, which is got a really good sort of acting pedigree with Richard Burton, Michael Sheen, Anthony Hopkins. Not that I'm comparing myself to these people, but there's always got that sort of magic about it. Port Talbot, it's got a bad reputation, but it's an incredibly magical place. And the people there are so passionate about the arts. So I grew up with a passion for the arts, really. But when I was younger, I did quite a little bit. I did some television stuff. I was lucky. I did some plays. I did some touring. And then I spent 20 years in the police force, and which was a strange sort of curveball of a career to take, really. But when I did that, I found that I was a shift worker, so I couldn't be in the same place, say, every Thursday or every Tuesday to meet with people and do plays or be there in the morning. And I had young children. So I had to look for something that I could do myself. And that purely came with storytelling. And I can remember the day it started. I was hired to go to a museum and to be a Roman soldier and talk about life in Roman Britain for school children, you know. So I dressed as a Roman soldier, always had good legs. But I was there, I was telling the story. And to my horror, I found out that the kids were booked to spend an hour with me. And I had about 20 minutes worth of material, you know, talking about different types of pottery and things like that. So then I thought, oh, God, what am I going to do? So I told a Greek myth just to fill the time, if you like.
Yeah.
And from then, that sort of grew and it just became more and more of a thing. And I was really lucky in the police. I was posted to the Swansea Valley, and the Swansea Valley is a magical place, Joe. It's we'll talk about it a little further when we go about the stories. They've got a sleeping giant in the hills. They've got so many stories about fairies, fairy sightings, so many legends, so many ghosts. And it's a small police station, and I'd often work on my own. And I'd work on my own, and I would drive up and down the Swansea Valley at the middle of the night often. And I would think about things, I would see things, I would hear things. And I started writing down little myths and legends that people had told me and people had seen things. And I started performing, you know, just in the church halls there and things like that. And my audience grew and grew, and it became really quite successful. I brought a CD out. I started performing. I went to the Edinburgh Festival and I performed a few times. I went to America. And then when the pandemic... Yeah, when the pandemic came, I realized I was probably telling the same 5 stories, you know, all the time. And I thought, right, I've got to stretch myself. So I sat in the chair behind me there, and I thought every week I'm going to release a new story on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I did that, and I would literally read the story and then perform it. And that became quite successful, and that became Time Between Times on YouTube and still there. And then from there, I started a podcast, as you know, Time Between Times, the Storytelling Podcast. But I wanted to base that around mindful listening. I really like, you know, sort of trying to help with our mental health and relaxing and letting a story awaken your imagination and let all those bad things go out of your mind and let your story in order to sort of help with your creativity, to help you stay positive about things. And that's what I based it on. And really it's been more successful than I could ever have hoped, really, which is something. And then I met Bethan through that. I started doing stories on Twitter Spaces, and Bethan started coming to those. And she said, look, do you want to do something together? So Bethan's from South Wales as well, living in Essex. So we started doing The Spectre of the Sea, which is more of a docudrama sort of version of the stories, really. And she's so good at the technological side of it, with the sound, the music, and that sort of stuff. And I do some of the writing, and we both perform it. And here we are, really, which is nice.
That's it. I do. I love both of them for different reasons. And I think the Time Between Times, you know, you kind of, it's like you're beckoning your listeners in, you know, come and take a seat, you know, around the fire. And, you know, that really appeals immediately. You can imagine that kind of vibe. And then you're, you know, taking them very gently into the story. And they're always really entertaining, and your delivery is fantastic. You know, matching your the kinfolk of your town, I should say, as well. Must be something in the water. No. And then or the beer, I don't know.
The beer probably, or the whiskey, beer. I would imagine. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then you know, The Spectre of the Sea, it's really characterful, and it's great fun, and it's quite mysterious as well. Yeah, so I do enjoy listening to that. Yeah, it's a great one. Particularly, we often listen to it, you know, going off to sleep. We listen to that one to give ourselves some spooky dreams. But do you think that the storytelling, then, if it doesn't come from your family, what inspired you in the first place in terms of the way that you deliver it? Because not everyone can do that, and it feels like you know, I wondered whether there was something maybe in childhood that you experienced yourself in terms of hearing great storytelling or... Healing has helped me many times in my life when I'd reached a point where something needed to change. In 2005, I trained with Martin Brofman to learn the body mirror system of healing, which was life-changing for me. It's based on the idea that the parts of your body that don't work well reflect the parts of your life that don't work well, and about which you have tension in your consciousness. The understanding is that tension is stress, and stress causes symptoms. In a distance healing or in-person session, I move up the chakras, returning each one to wholeness using a colour map. During the process, I see images and situations, I hear words or receive impressions that tell me something about what caused the tension in that person's life. The feedback at the end of the session is a really big part of the healing. If you're interested in a chakra healing session, you can contact me at scarletofthefae@gmail.com.
It's a strange one, isn't it? Because it's not something, as I said, that runs through my family. However, my great-great-grandfather was a guy called Owen Griffiths, and my son is called Owen, but his name was Owen Griffiths, and he was a Methodist preacher in the sort of Welsh Methodist revival that happened towards the end of the 19th.
That was massive.
Was huge.
It was absolutely massive, wasn't it?
He was really known as a really popular lay preacher and would speak a lot, and people would gather around that. So I know very little about him. I know that he died at a young age, but he was very well known for his preaching. So that's the only thing I can imagine where this probably came from, this sort of storytelling. Yeah. I think it's interesting. I've always been a little bit attuned with sort of magical things, and I've always been attracted to ghosts and legends and fairies and stories and that sort of thing, even as a small child. And I've got a little sort of what I think is a fairy experience, which I could share with you. And that comes from when I was so small. I must have been about probably under 2 years old, and my parents lived in a bungalow in the Avon Valley, and it's quite Port Talbot's quite an industrial place, but you go up the Avon Valley and it's a beautiful sort of forested area. It's where Richard Burton was born, Ivor Emmanuel, who people might remember from Zulu. It's got quite a reputation for choirs and song and that type of thing. And one night I can remember being in bed, and it can't have been that late. You know, I was just sort of going to sleep. I must have been under 3 or 4. I must have been under 4 because my sister was born when I was 4 and I moved bedrooms. But I remember this bedroom. And the door was partially open and my bed was looking at the door and I was laying there. And all of a sudden, a light came into the room. And it was like the sun, but about the size of a football. And it just floated across the room in front of the bed. And I was terrified, first of all. And I went underneath and I went under the bed. And I could remember looking under the bed and I could see the bottom of the light, sort of like a sun in the room.
Yeah.
But then I became curious and I went and I climbed out from under the bed, and the light went behind. There must have been a gap of maybe an inch or two behind the wardrobe, the far end of my room. And it went behind there. And I can remember looking behind it and thinking, you know, wow, what's this? You know, what could it be? And as it went there, the light dimmed and slowly went away. You could feel the shadow. Yeah. So I went and I told my mother, and my mother was like, don't be silly, you know, go back to sleep. It's nothing. You're just dreaming, you're imagining things. And that might have been the case. But I can remember then it was probably a year later, and I had this, it was Rupert the Bear wallpaper. I can remember Rupert the Bear wallpaper. And it was behind where the cupboard was, some of the wallpaper. And I was getting older, and my sister had been born, and we were moving into the new bedroom. And my mother moved the wardrobe, and the wallpaper behind where the sun had gone had all discoloured and come away from the wall.
Oh, my goodness.
So, yeah, it was really odd. And I sort of forgot about it for years. And I'm someone, I've counted, I think in my life I've seen 5 ghosts. But if you ask me if I believe in ghosts, I'll tell you I don't know. Because I can they've always been where, as you said earlier on, when you least expect it, out of the corner of my eye. I think if you go looking for ghosts, you go looking for fairies, you very seldom find them, but they will appear, and they will come. And I was writing an article actually about my experiences, and it's only sort of fairly recently that I've gone back to that one and think, well, maybe it was something to do with the fairies or the fae. I don't know. But all my life, I've been attracted to myths, to fairy stories, to ghost stories, to legends, and that sort of darker edge of folklore, really, which has really appealed to me. And it appeals to nobody else in my family except me, which is strange. And I've always not been a black sheep, but someone was always thought of as being a bit different. They're all been like working people, and whereas I've always been really creative, which is different, and that's where it comes from, really. I think it goes back to that. Yeah,
I think a lot of people, watching and listening, will feel they know exactly what that feels like. That's very interesting with the sun. And I'm sort of tempted to ask you, did you have any interesting dreams when you were a young kid around that age? Do you remember them?
I used to have a lot of recurring dreams, a lot of dreams that used to happen a lot, and I often remember them, and they weren't frightening or they weren't damaging or scary. They were dreams of, like, I can remember there was one where myself and a load of friends were trying to build a bridge, and we were trying to build a bridge in this area full of white rock, like a sort of almost desert landscape. And I can't remember much of the ins and outs of it, but I would always have this dream about building the bridge with my friends. And it's strange. And then I think, like a lot of people, things stopped, and things sort of, when you become a teenager and at the early adulthood, it all sort of went away. And I become, but I'm always the sort of person, I never seem to stay in the same, I've got itchy feet. I'm always moving on. I always want to go to the next thing. I'm never happy where I am right now, and I think that is an urge to create that I have, which I've always had. But and it's strange. I think a lot of folklore, I don't know how this will come across really, but in my younger age as well, I used to play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games and things like that. And I would always be the one who would be the dungeon master, who'd always have to create the story, create the game. And I think a lot of my storytelling came from that as well, where I just had to... I had to think on the fly. I had to make things up. I had to improvise all the time, and improvisational theatre. I've done a little bit of comedy. The storytelling is always improvised. So, that's how I've always been, really, I suppose.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the kind of the bridge making. I think that's what you kind of do. You build a bridge for people to the other world, if you like, or to step into new spaces. That's kind of what that feels like.
Possibly, yeah. It could have been, couldn't it? I don't know. Maybe it was. Maybe it was. And what was interesting with that, and I remember this clearly, is that I had a group of friends, but as I met more people, they joined in the dream.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah.
You'd have like the original like gang, if you like, but as I went through my life, it would have more and more people
expanded.
In it. And,
I love that. And that's exactly what's happened with your endeavours now, is reaching more people. So do you think you could treat us to a little of your magic, please? I feel like turning down the lights a bit, but come on.
Of course I will, Jo. Well, you sit back, you relax. I'll tell you a story. I know you've heard this one before. It's one of my favourites, but it involves the Tylwyth Teg, and it involves the Swansea Valley, which is two of my favourite things, really. So I'll do what I do when I always tell the stories. And if anyone, listens to the podcast, they'll come across this. And that is joining me at the time between times. Now, for those of you who don't know, the time between times is the time when it's neither night nor day, but the sun is gone and the sky is grey. The time when the veil between our world and the fairy world grows wafer thin. So thin that for a few moments, and just a few moments, you can reach into their realm. And for a few moments, they can reach into ours. Now is the time that people see lights in the sky. Now is the time that people see the Tylwyth Teg. Now is the time that people see ghosts. So let me take you long ago and far away on a tide of tales as we sit at the fire pit at the heart of the forest at the time between times, where I will tell you a tale of something that happened 200 years ago this very night. Not far from here, there is a small town called Ystrad. It's hard to say, but it's a beautiful, dark, ugly place. It's in the middle of the Swansea Valley, a place so dark they say that the sun only shines there for an hour a day, and then at the height of midsummer. The rocks on either side reach up, and the trees on the roads hang over like hooked claws. And 200 years ago, this very night, in a place called the New Inn. Now, the New Inn was never new. Even when it was built, it was old, the roof was leaky, the fire barely rose above a spark. And yet 200 years ago, this very night, two men sat next to it with murder on their minds. Their names were Iago and Gronwy, and they were wreckers. Now, for those of you who don't know, wreckers would stand on the Gower coast with their lanterns, causing ships to wreck upon the rocks. When the sailors would lose their lives, they would rush out and steal all the gold and silver they could find. And Iago and Gronwy had won and lost more fortunes than anyone could ever remember in this way. Iago was tall and thin, with a tricorn hat and long dark hair that hung to his shoulders, and he talked in a voice like this. His brother Gronwy was big and fat, with a great big black beard, always carried a blunderbuss gun, and he talked in a voice like this. And this night, 200 years ago, this very night, they sat in the New Inn and had this conversation. Well, my brother, let me tell you something, right? They say there's a coach that makes its way up the valley, round and round, up and down it goes, past the villages of Llyswen, Abercrave, until it comes to Penwyllt. It's on its way to Brecon. It's on its way to Brecon, and it's full of gold to pay the soldiers who live there. They say if you open the doors, the gold would run out like a river. And it passes tonight, at midnight. Well, how do you know this? I mean, we could stand there for days on end and you wouldn't see. I know it because a shepherd told me. So what we do, we leave here now. We make our way up the valley as the moon is high. There's an old oak tree hanging over the road there. I climb up the oak. You stand next to it with your gun. When I see the lights of the coach, I'll call like an owl, like this. Oh, oh, oh. Is that an owl? Yes. And then, as soon as you hear the call of the owl, you jump in front of the coach, give it the old stand and deliver, and before you know it, we're the richest men Wales have ever known. All right, we'll give it a go. But know this, that if this doesn't work out, it's the end for you and me, you know. Iago and Gronwy finished their drinks. They walked outside, and there was their old rickety cart, pulled by a black mare called Shadow. She was so thin you could see her ribs. They climbed on the cart and made their winding way up the valley, until at last they came to Penwyllt. There Iago scampered up the tree like a squirrel, whereas Gronwy looked at him once, found a small cave and went and lay down and was soon snoring like a pig. Iago waited and waited. Far away he could hear the church bells ring. The time between times came, the time when it was neither night nor day, but the sun had gone and the sky was grey. Iago started to nod. He picked under his fingertips with his knife. He looked up and down the valley. And then at midnight, he saw something he did not expect. He saw a single light started to make its winding way. He turned to his brother. But then he looked again and saw that it was not one light, but 2 lights, 5 lights, 10 lights, 50 lights. And these lights were not high like the lights of a coach. Oh no, these lights were low to the ground. And then Iago looked again, and his black heart started to beat so fast he felt it would burst from his chest. because each of these lights was carried by one of the Tylwyth Teg. Now, for those of you who don't know, these are not the fairies that we see in films and books these days. The Tylwyth Teg. They could make you go to sleep like that and not wake for 100 years. They would take a baby and replace it with a changeling. And Iago knew that he was doomed. He looked upon them. Some of them were shuffling, ugly, goblin-like creatures that shuffled their way up the valley, while others would dance under the moonlight, the most beautiful things he had ever seen. And each of them carried in one hand a lantern, and in the other hand a single gold coin. Iago hid his face into the tree, trying to hide his sight, but his greed caused him to look and drawn to the Tylwyth Teg as they danced under the tree. They made their way to a small opening in the hillside. It looked like an old broken wall, something the men of Rome had built all those years ago when they marched up these valleys. And they stopped, looked inside, cupped their hands around their mouths, and called out, "Gallwch! Gallwch!" Each of the Tylwyth Teg vanished into the cave, down and out, arriving moments later without the gold coin and making their way off into the forest. Iago watched them come and go. Look, the Tylwyth Teg, the Bendith and Mamai, the fairies, they're making their way in there. They're putting their gold in that cave, and they're going. And I know the password. The password is Gallwch, Gallwch. Oh, ho, ho, ho. Iago watched as the fairies vanished into the forest, and then summoning all his courage, he climbed down from the tree and walked over to Gronwy. I don't have to wake him up, do I? Look, he's just snoring. I'll go to the cave. I'll say the magic word, in I go. I get the gold, I fill my pockets, and I leave here before anyone has ever seen me. He made his way to the mouth of the cave and peered inside. He could barely see his hand in front of his face. Gallwch, Gallwch, he called. He ducked inside, made his way down and to the left, back and to the right. Under stalagmite, over stalactite, or is it the other way round? I can never remember. Back and round, down and up he came, until he felt like he would come out into the centre of the earth. But there he found it, deep under the ground. A room very much like the room that you're in right now, except all around its walls were great iron hooks, and from those hooks hung great sacks, and from those sacks ran rivers of gold. Iago jumped into the gold up to his knees and started to fill his pocket, fill his coat, fill it under his hat. Oh, look at this! I'm the richest man anyone's ever seen! Ha ha! And nobody knows where Then something happened he did not expect. What he thought was just a pile of rags in the corner of the room started to move and shuffle. What he thought was just a detritus and ruinous pile of rubbish suddenly stood up, and the rags fell away, revealing the skull of a horse with glowing green eyes. And at that point, Iago knew he was doomed, for this was the Mari Lwyd, the queen of the fairies, the first horse that winter killed. Mari Lwyd, to look upon her meant certain doom. He fell to his knees and begged, "Oh, Mari Lwyd, please let me go. Please, please let me go." The Mari turned to him and spoke in a voice as old as the mountain and as capricious as the sea. "Why have you come here? Thief." "Oh, I'm not a thief. I'm not a thief. You got to let me go, Mari. Look, I can give you all the gold back." Iago started to unload the gold onto the floor, moving everything out of his pockets. It dropped with clangs and glinted in the light. "You are a thief, and you have come here to my lair." "Oh, Mari, please, you got to let me go. Look, I know the password. The password is Gallwch, Gallwch." "You know the password to come in. Do you know the password to leave? You mean there's a password to leave? Oh, yes. Oh, Mary Lloyd, please let me go. Please, I beg you. I'm begging you with every beat I got left in my heart. Please let me go. You have come across me on a good night, thief. You may go, but know this, that the next mortal to come to my lair will be mine. Mine forever, do you understand? Oh, yeah, I understand, Mary. Don't you worry. With that, Iago was gone. He rushed his way up and to the left, back and to the right, until he burst out into the valley above Swansea Port and started to run and run and run, and he would have run all the way with the branches clawing at his face. But a figure stepped out in front of him. A figure with a gun. Where do you think you're going, brother? Oh, Cronwy, we got to get out of here, right? Look, we got to go. Let's go back. Let's forget about it all. Let's just go back to the pub and we... You robbed the coach, didn't you? No, I didn't rob the coach. You robbed the coach while I was sleeping in the cave. It was at that point that fate, like it often does, intervened. And as Iago lifted his hands above his head, a single gold coin fell onto the ground with a clink. Well, if you haven't robbed the coach, what's that? Oh, Gronwy. Yeah, all right. I robbed the coach. I robbed the coach and I put all the gold in a cave over there. There's a password, mind. It's called Gallwch. Just make your way down and to the left, back and to the right until you come to a room, and that's where I put all the gold. And now I'm gone. With that, Iago was gone, never seen in the Swansea Valley ever again. Gronwy made his way to the cave, peered inside. Oh, it's dark in there. He went inside and vanished, never seen again. Many years later, an opera singer with the voice of an angel called Adelina Patti came to the Swansea Valley. She wanted to build a castle that stretched to the sky. She called it Craig y Nos, still stands to this day. But as they were building it, the workmen dug deep underneath and they found the room with the hooks. But there was no gold. There was no Mary Lloyd. Just a single human skull hanging on a hook. One of the builders took the skull and placed it in a bag under his bed. But every night, the darkness at the time between times, the skull would scream, Gallwch, Gallwch. He took the skull and placed it on his horse and rode all the way to Swansea, coming to the museum with this great Greek facade, hammered on the door. They took the skull to the deepest room in the darkest chamber and had put it in a great safe. But every night it would call out, Gallwch, Gallwch, until eventually they rowed it far out to sea and dropped it in the ocean, and only then was it quiet. But even now, on nights like tonight, at the time between times, if you go to the Swansea Valley, to Craig y Nos, to Penwyllt, and you listen on the ground, you can hear the cries of a man deep underground. Gallwch, Gallwch. A man who tried to rob the Fae, rob the Tylwyth Teg, and rob the Mary Lloyd. And that, my friends, is the story of the robbers of Penwyllt. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much. There we are.
Fantastic, Owen. Absolutely brilliant. I really love that story. Oh my goodness. And the accents, they just get me every time.
I think with that story, Joe, it brings a lot of, I know I've talked about that area, but there is such a dark fairy lore there and stories of the Bendith and Mamau, the Tylwyth Teg, that people really believe. And amongst the older people as well, there's such a strong fairy belief. And there is a cave and there was a skeleton found. And the Mary Lloyd, which is the horse's skull, which is often paraded in the town at Christmas, all come together to link that story. And there must be an element of truth in there somewhere, I think, you know.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And you mentioned about the kind of faith of the people around there. Did you experience that as a kid? Various traditions and folklore and folk sort of faiths in the area?
I found it was a really interesting one. It wasn't when I was a kid. I didn't go there till I was actually working in the police. And I can remember I used to, there was a community hall in a village called Colburn, which is right out in the sticks. And a lot of older people lived there. And they were a fantastic group of people full of folklore, of legends, loved their stories. And I can remember one day we were looking out the window of the community hall, and the field behind was filled with these grass tufts. And there were literally hundreds of these grass tufts. And a bike had been stolen. And apparently the bike had been dumped on the other side of the field. And this woman knew exactly where it was. And I said, come on, let's walk across the field and we'll go and find the bike. And she said, no, will you take me around the field in the car? And I said, yeah. And I thought, it must be muddy, or she's afraid of walking on the grass. And I said, is everything okay? And she said, look at the tufts, look at the grass tufts. They are the Bendith Amamai, the mother's blessing. They live just under the earth until the time between times, when they will emerge from the earth and go about their business. Like those, I always thought of them as those troll figures you see with the hair, that spiky hair. But she honestly believed and had, when she was younger, she said that she saw them rising from the ground, and she wouldn't walk over the field because of that. And she didn't want to disturb them in the day because she didn't want them to get in their bad books, essentially. So, I thought that was really interesting.
That is very interesting.
Mm.
I can picture exactly the tufts you mean. And we visited an Iron Age hill fort recently, and I can't remember the name of it. I'm useless at remembering things, but I'll put it up here anyway. But they had that once you climbed up there, they had these tufts everywhere, and they did feel quite eerie, actually.
Yeah,
and it was, I think that was it was Dolbury Warren we went to, because it was later named Dolbury Warren rather than Dolbury Hill Fort, because they had, in later centuries, they had actually used it as a rabbit warren for going hunting rabbits up there. And go up there and rabbits, but they are. It's a very interesting aspect to the landscape when you see those little tufts. There's something
it would.
that.
I found with Colburn as well, it's a village that's basically on the top of a hill, and at night the moon would shine on it like nowhere else. It would bring this sort of shadowy thing, and the tufts and the grass were really prominent at that time, because I'd often be up there late at night, and after that lady had told me that, I always had that in the back of my mind, that maybe there was something to it. And it was interesting, really interesting. But she genuinely had that belief and that faith that they were there, and at night they moved. So
gosh, and that she'd seen them. I wonder if anyone else had experienced that as well. I mean, there might be. I've never come read it in any folklore, but I'm going to be keeping my eye out now for that. Yeah. And didn't you have one night a bit of a potential ghost experience driving along?
I did, many years ago. I was literally driving up the valley there late at night, and I came over the top of a hill, and there was a bus stop on the right hand side, and in that bus stop there was I can see her now as clear as day, an old lady just standing in the bus stop waving a hand up and down as if she was trying to flag the car down. And being the brave sort of guy that I was, I just drove straight past. And I thought, hang on a second, it's like 3 a.m. And I turned the car around and I went back, and there was nobody there, and there was nowhere she could have gone. And it was just, I think I've said to you before, I probably had a number of ghostly encounters in my life. I don't know if I believe in ghosts. I don't know. I can usually, with that one, I often think, was I just that tired that I was almost nodding and it was something that woke me up? Was it a trick of the light? All these things. But at the end of the day, I definitely saw that. I definitely saw it. Just like I definitely saw the sun in the room. And other times as well, sort of ghostly encounters, really. And yes, I've got a vivid imagination. I tell stories, but I do trust my eyes as well, and
Yeah.
I think I'm quite grounded for the most part, and yeah, I definitely saw something. And but I'm fascinated by fairy encounters. I think there's so much to them, and in Welsh folklore in particular, so much revolves around coming across, fairy dances, fairies coming into the house late at night. So much people still leave gifts out for the fairies, the Tylwyth Teg. There is a lot to it, and it's something that it's still quite strong. I think, especially among older people.
Yeah, and I mean, like Ireland, they're very much to be feared.
Mm, mm,
The relationship with the Fae is definitely one that is maintained as a respectful relationship. Did you have any
yeah.
stories when you were younger? Any kind of traditional folk tales that you particularly enjoyed when you were younger that you may have heard?
Yeah, there's a load of stories that I think the one I think I'll tell you if you're ready for another story. I'll tell you the
Yeah,
one that
sure.
I always sort of resonates with me really because it's basically about a storyteller, and it's the story of Gwion and the witch, and now it's April. We're recording this, at the sort of Beltane time and around there, aren't we? So
Mm.
I think it's all about rebirth, and it's about belief, and it's about magic. So sit back and I'll tell you the story of Gwion and the witch. Long ago, not far from here, there lived a witch called Ceridwen. She was old with a crooked back and hooked claws for hands, and she talked in a voice like this. Ceridwen wanted to be the cleverest witch in the whole wide world. So she pulled a book from a bookshelf, a book covered in dust. She blew away the dust and looked through the spells until she found the one she was looking for. How to be the cleverest witch in the whole wide world. Take 3 spiders' legs and put them in a pot. Take 3 ants' eyes and put them in a pot. And take 4 whole frogs and put them in a pot. And stir that pot. Always clockwise, never anti-clockwise, always stirring, never eating, never sleeping, never drinking for a year and a day. And then drink 3 drops of the potion. Not 1, not 2, not 4, but 3. And become the cleverest witch in the whole wide world. Ceridwen went out to the garden where the frogs and the newts did play. She found all the ingredients she required and dropped them in a pot. But then realization struck her. A year and a day. Stir the potion for a year and a day, never eating, never drinking, never sleeping. Well, I'm not doing that. No, I'll find someone else to do it. She left her house, walked down the street. All the people saw her coming and were terrified of Ceridwen. All the doors to all the houses slammed shut, and the people ran into the forest, till she came to the place where all the children played. The children ran away screaming, except one boy. He was tall and thin, with bright red hair that stretched to the sky. His name was Gwion. Hello, Ceridwen. Hello, how are you? I'm Gwion. I know. Come to my house. There is a potion. You need to stir it, clockwise, never anti-clockwise, always stirring, never eating, never drinking, never sleeping for a year and a day. Do you understand? Yes, Gwion. Yes, Ceridwen. I'll do it. I'll do it. Gwion made his way back to the house and stood in front of the pot. Started to stir, round and round and round. Days turned to weeks, weeks turned to months, months turned to a whole year, and still he stirred. Until the night before Ceridwen was to drink the potion, she came to see him. Gwion, tomorrow I will drink 3 drops of the potion, not 1, not 2, not 4, but 3, and become the cleverest witch in the whole wide world. But tonight there will be a storm so loud it feels like the gods are going to throw boulders in the sky. But you must not stop stirring. Do you understand? No, I won't. Don't worry. Ha ha. The storm started about 4 o'clock. The rain started to fall till it beat down on the roof like thunder. And then the thunder started. like the gods throwing boulders in the sky. But still Gwion stirred and stirred. Then the lightning started, far away, small sparks, but coming closer and closer until they lit up the sky like it was day. Still he stirred. But then at midnight, directly when the clock struck 12, a huge bolt of lightning shot from the sky and bang! It caused the whole house to shake. It hit Ceridwen's cottage, and the whole house shook back and forth. The pot started to twist and turn, and out of the pot came 3 drops of the potion that landed on Gwion's hand. 1, 2, 3. There's 3 drops of the potion, and they're on my hand. I don't know what to do. What shall I do? I know. I'll drink them. Ant-sized. Frogs. Spiders. Then something happened. The clouds in Gwion's mind started to part. All of a sudden, he knew the answers to everything. He knew every song that had ever been sung, every tale that had ever been told, every poem that had ever been performed. He knew absolutely everything. He became the cleverest boy in the whole wide world. He danced up and down. He danced a jig of joy. But then behind him, in the doorway, he realized he was being watched by Ceridwen. What is going on here? There were 3 drops, Ceridwen, and they fell out of the potion, and they landed on my hand, and I drank them. You did what? I drank them. You have ruined the potion. I took a year and a day to make. Then you must die. She opened her robe and pulled out a dagger and rushed at Gwion. He didn't know what to do, but then he knew exactly what to do. For he was the cleverest boy in the whole wide world, and he uttered a spell in a language that was as old as the mountains, and changed into a small, white, floppy-eared rabbit, and ran between Ceridwen's legs, out of the house, over the wall, down through the garden, through the forest. He ran and ran and ran. Ceridwen turned around. Her anger knew no bounds, and she cast a spell and turned into a great big black hunting dog. Woo, 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 and chased after the rabbit. The rabbit ran and ran and ran through the fields, through the forest, until it came to a swiftly flowing stream. And there, the rabbit turned into a fish, jumped into the stream and swam away. But the dog arrived, and the dog turned into an otter. And the otter chased the fish, and over stream and under rock they went until they came to an old lake in the middle of nowhere. And there the otter was just about to catch the fish, but the fish jumped out of the water and changed to a small, flappy little bird and flew into the clouds. The otter fell back to the water, but then emerging from the water came a great big eagle. And the eagle chased the small bird over the clouds, over the forests, over the mountains, always trying to catch it in its claws. But then Gwion had one last trick up his sleeve and changed from a small bird into a single solitary seed, a seed that fell through the sky and landed in a field full of seeds. The eagle flapped around, watching. Where has he gone? Where has he gone? But then the eagle changed to a chicken and started to peck at the seeds, getting closer and closer until finally it found the seed that was Gwion and swallowed him whole. In a flash of light, the eagle vanished, or the chicken vanished, and changed to Ceridwen the witch. Nobody gets the better of Ceridwen. Nobody. What's happening to me? What's happening? Her belly grew bigger and bigger and bigger. What's happening to me? Until it went pop. And out of her belly flew a small baby that landed in her arms. She held the baby who had his thumb in his mouth. Hello, Mum. What? Mum, who do you think you are? Who are you? I don't know who I am. But please look after me. Please look after me. I will not, said Ceridwen. And she put the baby in a sack, carried the sack to a cliff overlooking the sea, and summoning all her strength, spun it round her head 3 times and flew it out to sea, where it landed with a splash. And that would be the end of our tale. But on that day, all those years ago, a fisherman was fishing on the sea. He had been there all day and found absolutely nothing. I've been here all day trying to find this one fish to take home, but I can't find it. I'm going to give it one more go. Yeah, let's try. He threw his rod out. I've caught something. I've caught a sack. He gave the sack a little kick. I've caught a moving sack. He opened the sack with his knife, and there was the baby. Hello, Dad. Who are you? I don't know who I am, but all I know is that Ceridwen the witch is trying to kill me. Please look after me. Please look after me. Of course I'll look after you. You're a gift from the sea. The fisherman took the baby home, hid him under his coat, and took him into his house. And the baby grew to be a boy. The boy grew to be a man. And the fisherman named him Taliesin, for he knew every story that had ever been told, every song that had ever been sung, every poem that had ever been performed. And Taliesin became the greatest storyteller the world had ever known. He told the tales of the land of Wales to everyone who had come. He told them at Arthur's round table. He told them in the mountains, in the woods, in the sea. And his tales were passed down from father to son, mother to daughter, brother to sister, friend to cousin, over many, many years from person to person. But years ago, on a night like this, at the time between times, the time when it's neither night nor day, but the sun has gone and the sky is grey, someone told it to me. And now tonight, I tell it to you, wherever you are. And that, my friends, is the story of Gwion and the Witch. I hope you enjoyed.
Fabulous. It's a great story. It has so many motifs that we see in lots of other tales. And yeah, it's absolutely fantastic, isn't it?
I love that story. It's one of my favourites. It's long. Kids love it when you tell it to them. And it's one of the oldest stories, in Wales, really. And it's a sort of an origin tale for storytelling, if you like, I think. Absolutely. So, yeah, it's something. And it's got magic in it. It's got like the different animals, as you said, and a great legend.
It's great. The wrong person getting the magic, or did they? And then the chase. And the kind of the tale of the baby arriving, of course, reflecting Moses' story probably came later, to be honest, after that.
Yeah, it could well have been. And I always think of it that this time of year it's a rebirth story, and that's something that I find really heartening. Really, it's nice. There
Fabulous. Yeah. Oh, thank you very much, Owen. That's really great. No, yeah. And so where can people hear you, go and see you? Do you do any live shows anywhere anymore?
I do. The last couple of years have been pretty barren, because of like all of us, really. But I always like live shows. I am currently, funny enough, I am writing a show ready for the winter. So I know it's a way off, but I'm going to write a show about theatre ghosts at the moment. So I'm in the middle of doing that. I perform quite a lot in local areas. Where people will mostly find me is the Time Between Times podcast, the Time Between Times YouTube channel, and Spectre of the Sea, which is a podcast as well. And if they were to join me there, I would be very, very grateful, and that would be fantastic. And every week I release a new story. They are ghost stories, they are legends, they are folkloric tales from all over the world. And I always tell anyone every week on the podcast, but it's done in the mindful way to allow you to get into the story and just let your cares and your worries disappear for a while I tell you an old story. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I love it. And I just love to, when we're listening, I just, we sit there, we get comfortable, we get a nice cup of tea or whatever, and I just close my eyes and I can see it. I can see every moment of it. They're such vivid tales and the way that you deliver them. And I really love that. It really does take you away. And there's something, I feel kind of rested, but also you've met with, you've kind of stepped over into another world, or you've gone back in history, or you've gone to a land somewhere, either a mysterious land, or you've gone into that cave of the Tylwyth and been slightly terrified. And you come back with something as well, don't you? There's always different aspects to the stories that you tune into. I find for me, it's different every time. And
it is. And a lot of them are quite frightening, or they're quite dark stories, but I find them very interesting and sort of soothing in a way as well.
Yeah.
It's strange. And they're the sort of things that I used to love growing up. And the sort of things you come across in old ghost story books and things like that. And I just think there's something about them being told in a as live sort of way, really. I try not to edit the stories very much. I try not to edit the podcast. I try to do it as a live performance. So sometimes I make mistakes, whatever, but it's just the way it is. And I just think that as humans, we are conditioned to listen to stories, and we get a lot from listening to stories. And,
we need it, don't we?
We do, definitely.
Yeah, we kind of receiving it on many different levels, I feel.
Definitely.
And so that's, at the time you're enjoying it, and it's, it's entertainment, and like I say, it's soothing. And then afterwards, maybe you take it into your dreams with you, or maybe it reminds you of something and you go off on a trail with that. But you do get a lot from it. So thank you for everything that you're doing. And don't you do live on Twitter? You do Twitter Space as well. Can you tell us what time?
Yeah. I tend to. I've not done it the last couple of weeks just because I've purely been busy doing something. But as of it will be Sunday, the 30th of April at 9:00 every Sunday. I don't know when this is going out, but every Sunday at 9:00, I usually tell a tale on Twitter Spaces. If you follow me on Twitter, it's at Owen S. Griffiths on Twitter, or look for Owen Staton. I will. I then post a little link, and if you don't know Twitter Spaces, it's basically like a Zoom meeting, but I go in there. It's an audio thing, and I just tell a story every Sunday night to ease us into the week. And a lot of people seem to like that, and it's nice, And I enjoy it. And we'll often share a drink around the fire pit at the heart of the forest, and we'll sit and tell a story just to ease us into the week that comes, which is nice.
Yeah, splendid, perfectly suited. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And please come back again. And look forward to hearing some more tales. Perhaps maybe we might do another one as we go into the darkness of winter. That might be nice, mightn't it?
I would love that, Jo, and yourself as well. I love the podcast, as you know. I love all the stories that come here. And I love the way that these old stories still resonate today, and that people are still seeing things as people did all those years ago. So there are things there, and there are messages being given, I believe. And I listen with interest to every single one that you put on here, and it's always great. Thank you.
Thank you. And if anybody knows anything about can you repeat the name that you gave for the tufty beings?
The Bendith y Mamau. It's an old Welsh name. It means the mother's blessing. What you find is in Wales, the fairies are often referred to as different things depending on where you are. For the most part, it's the Tylwyth Teg, but in the Gower, for example, they're called the Fairy Folk. So all the Gower people tend to call it, Tales of the Fairy Folk.
Right.
And then in the Swansea Valley, you find the Bendith y Mamau. And whether they're all describing the same thing or different things, I'm not sure.
I'll have to ask my friend that lives in the Gower. Has she seen any The
Fairy Folk, yeah.
Fairy Folk, the Fairy Folk.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Owen, and speak to you soon.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, take care of yourself.